Welcome to Darkened Streams, wherein I review every one of the 327 episodes of Supernatural, or however many YouTube and the CW allow before shutting me down. What did we learn in the last episode? Well, if you have prophetic dreams of your girlfriend dying, you should probably tell her. You should probably be open about your whole connection to a vast hidden world of the supernatural. But that's just me. You should also probably tell your brother, as it might be relevant to why your father is missing, but who knows. And lastly, if a ghost is killing unpunished child murderers, you better hope you don't listen to Fallout Boy. Season 1, Episode 6, entitled Skin, was written by John Shiban, a former staff writer of The X-Files, who wrote for many episodes of that show from Season 3 until the end of its original run. Like the incredibly memorable body horror adjacent episode, Leonard Betts, which was about a dude who could regenerate severed parts of his body by eating cancer, essentially. It's a good ep. It's a good ep. I'm sorry, I was distracted by a superior television program. Anyway, it's always a good sign to me when an X-Files writer is in the mix. Our director for this episode is Robert Duncan McNeil, who only directed one other episode of Supernatural all the way in Season 8, but before that had worked mainly on Star Trek's Enterprise and Voyager. But more serendipitous, he directed an episode of Dawson's Creek 2 years prior that happened to feature a recurring character played by Jensen Ackles. And oh boy, if you thought he was a fuckboy now, buddy, oof, let me, oh god. And then in this episode, he saves Audrey from being taken advantage by some douchebag. It's crazy. Let's just do other shows. Just as a disclaimer, this is probably my favorite episode of Season 1, and in general, one of my favorite episodes. It's one of the few that immediately flash in my head when I think about this series. And beyond that, I think this might be one of the best uses of the show's format. It really hooks you right at the beginning. Its cold open depicts a man with a knife looming over a bloodied hostage as a SWAT team infiltrates the home. They corner this guy only to reveal that it's Dean Winchester, in what may be an homage to a similar scene in the movie Manhunter that uses the same Iron Butterfly song. It then jarringly cuts back a week while Sam and Dean have a lighthearted conversation at a gas station. You know the vibe is a little silly when the comedy organ comes in. I think at this point, they're still sort of treating this whole experience as a road trip. I can only assume we're meant to understand they're just nomadically hunting. Sam checks his email on his cool futuristic phone and learns that an old college friend named Becky is looking for help after her brother Zach was arrested for torturing and murdering his girlfriend. She's convinced that he's not guilty though. Neither of them really have any reason to think this is their kind of thing, but Sam is strongly compelled to help out his old friend, and Dean tags along reluctantly, chiding him for continuing to pursue these relationships with people he can never truly be himself around. I kinda love how little use Dean has for relationships beyond Sam and his father. He's such a little trooper. The two go visit Becky, who explains to a still unconvinced Dean that her brother couldn't have killed his girlfriend as it would require him to be in two places at once, though there is a rather damning security camera tape that shows him entering their home around the time of death. I feel like a lot of this initial investigation phase works because we can sort of guess by now what kind of thing they're on the trail of. There's a lot of learning just by showing. It feels like an X-Files episode that just happens to feature Sam and Dean, no doubt aided by how uncharacteristically violent and creepy it is, but also how often we cut to the monster. X-Files monsters are often the stars of their episode, and that isn't always the case with Supernatural. It brought to mind episodes like Squeeze, where our time is split between monster and those hunting the monster, and we get that shot of them leering at their next victim with enhanced creature vision. There's also a similar shot of the creature's collection of trophy trinkets. That's a good episode. It's good it's like a... Yeah, I'm sorry. Reviewing the tape, Sam points out that Zach appears to have strange, reflective eyes that are illuminated on camera. Dean gives Sam a look that says, "Oh shit, are we about to hunt a reptilian?" While they're out taking a look at the crime scene, an ambulance races down the street to another murder with nearly identical circumstances. A woman tortured and murdered by her spouse who was apparently nowhere near the scene of the crime. They both conclude that this is indeed their kind of thing, and it's likely a shapeshifter, a creature that's been traveling between homes via a network of sewer tunnels, taking the form of husbands and using their forms to kill their partners, leaving behind a slimy pile of discarded flesh after every shift. Shifters are one of the more more interesting recurring creatures in this show, as they never seem to stick to a particular rule set. I mean that mostly beyond the show's first era. Even in this first iteration, which I enjoy the best, they make mention of there being a variety of creatures that do this sort of thing, but they kinda lump them all into one category, as they for the most part have the same weakness, a silver bullet to the heart. The lore for shifters becomes pretty muddy, especially around season 6, after they introduce the alpha shifter. They seem to rapidly either forget or stop caring about any kind of continuity with their abilities or properties. And by season 9, the VFX coordinator all but admitted that they made a mistake and just didn't understand that the thing in this episode is a shapeshifter, assuming all of them to be like the alpha, who could just morph into fucking anything at will without the agonizing looking shedding process. Yeah, they can just change their hairstyle if they want. They can just copy the clothes people are wearing too. How does that work? He only learned this by checking the show's wiki and being like, oh, I guess I fucked up, but hey, maybe it just changes sometimes. Fucking know this. I will hand it to them. They do get it. About a decade later, somebody's like, wait a second, shapeshifters have to pull their skin off and it's super gross, oh yeah! The boys decide to make this simple and just sweep the very comfortable looking sewer and gun down the shifter. Seriously, look at all this standing room. This is nice. The shifter gets the drop on them, wounding Dean, and they split up to track him down. This is another thing they'd never do in later seasons. Like, look at all these extras. They're actually on a mildly busy street. What is this, like a movie or something? You guys pay for all these people? Jesus Christ. Let's get the next scene in like a pancake house in the Midwest to recoup some money. The two regroup empty-handed, but Sam begins to suspect that Dean isn't Dean when he no longer shows any signs of injury. I like this sequence because it shows a creative characteristic of shifters which doesn't really return. The shifter, if it keeps the original person alive, forms some kind of psychic link between them, downloading their thoughts and memories, fully replacing someone mind and body in some kind of bizarre survival tactic. It's real interesting from a writing standpoint and an acting one. He's essentially trying to use Dean's thoughts to taunt Sam with, but himself getting emotionally invested in it as though it were his feelings as well. He reveals Dean's jealousy that Sam was able to pursue his dreams and to have friends and relationships, and his bitterness that after everything he gave up for his father's crusade, even he wound up leaving him.
You left. Hell, I did everything Dad asked me to and he dished me to. No explanation, nothing, just...
Using Dean's memory, the shifter decides that Becky will be his next victim, leaving Sam alive, presumably to be his next suit after he disposes of Dean. One thing I love about this creature, which is completely lost when we treat them as wizards, is how fucking unpleasant the process of shifting seems. Like, your fucking teeth and fingernails are popped out and replaced like a shark. It's fucking disgusting. And they just leave a pile of clothes behind. They don't mimic clothing. That would be dumb. Why would they do that? That would be an embarrassment. Also, shifters don't necessarily have to be shitty. Like, they aren't exactly vampires or werewolves. There isn't some big drawback for being what they are. They don't have to hunt people for blood or their heart. It's just a weird fluke of evolution. This one just happens to also be a profoundly broken person, a serial killer. You get a little glimpse into that psychology when Shifter Dean tries to hook up with Becky. He's very appropriately playing the role of Dean, even letting her in on the fact that they're hunters and they think her brother was framed by a shapeshifter, but it can't help but attempt to paint this being in a sympathetic light, and when she implies that such a thing would be a freak, you see him flinch like his feelings were hurt.
Well, what is it, like a genetic freak?
I always like that detail. It's like it snaps him back into focus, like, oh yeah, I hate everybody, I'm a murderer, that's what I'm here for. For a second, I thought I could have some kind of connection with a person, but no, I'm a murderer. Sam and real Dean manage to escape the shifter's lair, but they know how slim their chances are for making it there to save Becky, so they decide to fuck over Dean and just report the situation to the police anonymously, which is where we catch up with the cold opening. Becky is saved, but the shifter flees into the sewers and is able to shift again. And this is the only part of the episode I think doesn't make the greatest amount of sense, because without their weapons, they head back to the car to get more, which is in front of Becky's now well-monitored house. At this point, Dean is a wanted man. Like, they're showing a police sketch on TV and everything, so why do they think going to the scene of the crime is a good idea in any way? When the cops roll up, Dean runs off, but Sam stays to stall them because they can't hold him, but he's the suspect's brother, and Becky has no reason to believe that a shapeshifter attacked her. Like, she would still be thinking that her friend's crazy brother Dean Winchester savagely beat and attempted to kill her. It's only by pure luck that the shifter had already replaced Becky that this doesn't escalate immediately. Dean returns to the lair without Sam, but only finds Becky tied up, so Sam is actually hanging out with shifter Becky. I don't know. I mean, like, it's all well directed and acted, but any episode is going to be bad if you get bogged down by the logistics of it. The shifter returns to Dean's form. I don't know how exactly. Maybe it's like he's just unlocked that skin and can cycle between it and others now. Shifter Dean beats the shit out of Sam until real Dean and Becky show up and put a silver round through his heart. All of the shifter's murders are still pinned on Dean, but some of the heat is taken off him as he's officially dead on paper. For how unceremoniously this hunt ends, I think it does a really sweet job of marrying the shifter's conflict with the Winchester's conflict. The shifter liked being in Dean's form because he saw himself in him. He saw another loner, a freak, but one that still had people who cared about him, something he desperately wanted but was too angry and full of self-loathing to actually maintain. In the closing car scene, Dean apologizes for disrupting Sam's college life, with Sam claiming that it wouldn't have worked out anyway because he's a freak.
Well, I'm a freak too. I'm right there with you all the way.
It's fucking adorable, okay? There's a lot working in this episode, and aside from some muddled plot details near the end, it's a really solid Monster of the Week episode with impressive practical effects and strong performances. Even from Becky, who would have normally been a sort of throwaway character, when she gets emotional at the first crime scene, I really buy it. This is the first of many episodes where we get to see a heel turn from one of the boys, the first glimpse at bad Dean. I don't know how others feel about this, but I feel like Jensen and Jared seem to have more fun when they play villains, so it's always a pleasure to see them get to do something other than being hot and dumb. Anything that bugs me is very small. Sam's mic being in the shot in the first scene, and the first time we see Dean with his shirt off is followed by a hideous transformation sequence. Another thing I've caught that the wikis haven't is the hidden subtext that this whole time Sam may actually be a shapeshifter too. Still one of the best episodes, maybe the creepiest, if not one of the creepiest. It's also got two of the best musical cues in like the whole series. I guess this is as good a time as any to bring this up because I haven't yet, but if you're watching the show on Netflix, you're not going to hear a lot of these clearly more expensive licensed tracks, which I'm assuming they had the rights to air it on TV and put it on DVD but not stream it. So you're not going to hear Hey Man, Nice Shot or Inagata Devita. You're going to hear two mediocre tracks that they could afford that kind of kill the vibe. That's what we're stuck with unless you wanna buy the DVD. Beyond the first era, they never depict a shifter as being this formidable. For the time being, I really like that aside from them being especially fast and strong, a lot of the hassle that arises from them is how much trouble with the law they cause. It's not the only time a shifter comes in and gets them into shit with the police, and I've always liked that possibility hanging over them. It adds a certain tension to things. Later on, it's just sort of understood that one of a million things is happening behind the scenes that will clear up any trouble they find themselves in, because there just isn't any time to address that. Oh, I just got off the phone and everything's gonna be okay. Again, there is some great atmospheric lighting and cinematography. It's one of the strongest cold opens for sure. And one thing that's been really strong since episode 1, and this episode's no exception, are these glamour shots of the Impala driving by. I don't give a shit about cars, but that's a nice looking car. They know how to film that car, that's for sure. Speaking of cool looking cars, there's a, you'll never guess this. There's an episode of The X-Files called Drive, where Mulder has to drive a car with Bryan Cranston in the back away from an antenna array before his head explodes. It's a good
Maybe some sandwiches too.
What do you think this is, Hooters?
I wish.
You're kind of antisocial, you know that?
Yeah, whatever. I really wish things could be different.
Downloading your thoughts and memories.
Mean like the Vulcan mind meld?